Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, crime, pulp and horror, but all from indie authors. It's my small press spotlight. So this is a series of videos I do intermittently. I need to start doing them more regularly because I've got a huge backlog of stuff to talk about today. But videos where I talk about books that have been published, either like self-published or are from small presses. I'm really keen on the channel to try and support independent authors. So as somebody who has self-published stuff in the past, I know how difficult it is to get it out there, to get people reading it. So I'm always keen to talk about books that have been sent to me by small publishers or by independent authors, self-published authors and things like that. So I've got a stack of stuff to talk about. What I normally do in this video is I talk about all the books that I've kind of received in recently that I haven't got round to reading yet, and then I will also do mini reviews of, I think I've got 7 books that I've read. So these are all books I've talked about on the channel before in wrap-ups and things like that, but I like to do these videos as well just to give a bit more attention to them. And so if people are particularly looking to support independent authors, there's a place they can come on the channel to find recommendations. Right, so let's go through this huge stack. This is my huge stack of books that I've got on my lap that have been sent to me recently, or in some cases not quite so recently. So on the top of it, I've got a load of books, 5 books, from an author called David Bryan. So David contacted me recently, and I thought he was just going to send me 1 book, and he ended up sending me 5 books, but they all look really, really good. So I'm looking forward to reading them. So we have got by him Carmilla, A Dark Fugue, which is a kind of vampire-y thing, I believe. Oh, it's got werewolves and vampires, so a short story. So I will probably get to that one first out of all of his stuff. Once More with Feeling, which looks like a kind of psychological suspense type thing. So fantastic cover there for an indie book. The Bones of Morden Grey, which sounds like more of a haunted house kind of thing. Let me read you the blurb on this one because it does sound interesting. When perennial slacker Timothy Harker is forced into accepting a job as a junior undertaker, he soon becomes convinced that the building in which he works is haunted. He sets up 6 friends for a late night visit, planning a series of ghostly pranks to terrify his companions. It doesn't take long for him to prove It doesn't take long for him to prove the building is haunted, but they soon find there is far more to fear than the unfortunate souls trapped within the borders of Grey Skies and Tolliver. A depraved undertaker whose predilections go beyond the desire to resurrect the dead, a murdered girl bonded to the fiend who stole her life, and a desperate son on the verge of discovering a terrible secret about his missing mother are just some of the dark revelations awaiting them. Together, the 7 friends are about to uncover the long-buried truth about the Bones of Morden Grey. So that sounds really good. So yeah, looking forward to that one. And then this one, I'm really, really looking forward to. So I did flash this on the channel the other day as part of as like a random book from the shelf. So this is Feeding Grounds, which is a killer animals book about squirrels, which just sounds brilliant. So a classic kind of throwback paperbacks from hell style book. Lots of gore, lots of animals eating people by the sound of it, but squirrels as the villain, which sounds thoroughly entertaining. So yeah, looking forward to that one. And then this one, which looks like another kind of haunted style one. So this is The Strange Case at Misty Ridge. So thank you again, David, for sending me all of these. Really looking forward to reading them. They look like a lot of fun. Next up then, we have Feel Real by Luna Shoryo, which sounds very interesting as well. So let me read you the blurb on this one. When Esteban Salvas forges a document that states that his daughter Ella is delusional, it allows him to continue abusing her. No one believing she's telling the truth and everyone labelling her as delusional leads her to questioning her own sanity and whether or not what is happening is actually real. So an interesting kind of psychological thriller again there. That looks very interesting. This one, not quite so small pressy, but I'll show it anyway. So this is from Flame Tree Press. So Dragonfly Summer by J.H. Moncrief, which I've heard really good things about, so looking forward to that one. Right, next up, so someone I follow on Bookstagram was raving about this book the other day. So it is River of Ashes by Alexandrea Weis and Lucas Astor. I will read you the blurb. Oh, and it's beautifully put together as well. Look, it's got lovely sort of beginning parts to the chapters. Right, anyway, so the blurb is, along the banks of the Bogefly River sits the abandoned St. Francis Seminary. Beneath a canopy of oaks, blocked from prying eyes, the teens of St. Benedict High gather here on Fridays. The rest of the week belongs to school and family, but weekends belong to the river, and the river belongs to Beau Devereaux. The only child of a powerful family, Beau can do no wrong. Star quarterback, handsome, charming, the Prince of St. Benedict is the ultimate catch. He is also a psychopath. A dirty family secret buried for years, Beau's evil grows unchecked. In the shadows of the haunted abbey, he commits unspeakable acts on his victims and ensures their silence with threats and intimidation. Senior year, Beau sets his sights on his girlfriend's headstrong twin sister Leslie, who hates him. Everything he wants but cannot have, she will be his ultimate prize. As the victim toll mounts, it becomes clear that someone must stop Beau Devereaux, and that someone will pay with their lives. So this is from Vesuvian Books. Lovely cover, I have to say, and sounds really good. And as I say, someone I follow on Bookstagram said it was absolutely fantastic. Another one that's come through from the publisher. This is Comet Weather by Liz Williams. Which apparently the back says is Practical Magic meets The Witches of Eastwick, a contemporary tale of 4 Fae sisters. So B, the practical one, still living in the family home of Mooncote in Somerset. Stella vowed never to return to Mooncote following a row, but that was then. Serena, a single mother and fashion designer living in Notting Hill, increasingly uncertain of her relationship with rock singer boyfriend Ben. Luna, the youngest, living out of a horse-drawn van while she follows the Gypsy Switch, the route of horse fairs that spans the length of the country. The 4 fallow sisters, scattered like the 4 winds, but now united in their desire to find their mother Alice, who disappeared a year ago. They have help, of course, from the star spirits and the no longer living, but such advice tends to be cryptic and is hardly the most dependable of guides. A story to reignite your sense of wonder, an adventure that reaches from present-day London and rural Somerset to other times. To other places and other times. This sounds really interesting, and it's not necessarily the kind of thing I'd really read, but it sounds good, and it's got wonderful reviews on the back, including from Alistair Reynolds, the sci-fi author, who's quite a big name in sci-fi. So yeah, that sounds very interesting. Okay, next we have. So this is one that the author sent to me, James Tarr. I think it's a kind of near-future sci-fi thriller. So it's called These Troubled Days. So let me read you the blurb. In a divided city under the increasing influence of a ruthless megacorporation, a widow and his activist daughter, a sadistic private military contractor and his conflicted subordinate, and a congressman turned concentration camp director are on a collision course that will determine the fate of an America descending into fascism. This sounds really good. I do love near future dark sci-fi like that. So it looks very, very enjoyable. This one is a short story collection, Unshod, Cackling and Naked by Tamika Thompson. So one of the other books I'm going to be talking about in the kind of mini review section was also by Tamika Thompson, a short novel which I read and really enjoyed. So this is a short story collection with, I think, quite a variety of different stories in it. It's from Unnerving Press. Usually quite reliable. There's about 12 stories in it by the looks of it. So looking forward to that one. This one is something completely different from what I normally read, but does sound really fun. So this is The Mermaid of Venice by Jincey Lumpkin. It's the first in a series of books. So Jincey Lumpkin's written a whole load of books about mermaids, this being the first. So it just sounds like a a lot of kind of glitzy, trashy fun. So let me read you the blurb. Dive into the extremely glamorous life of Gia Acquaviva, an ultra-rich Venetian mogul with a portfolio of clubs and casinos around the globe. Gia harbours dark secrets and an underwater graveyard filled with the bones of her former lovers. Despite her sinister desires, she longs for true intimacy and believes she may have found her match in Cameron Langley, a successful American banker and dead ringer for Chris Hemsworth. They share an intensely passionate, deeply sensual connection, but is her growing affection for new lover enough to lull the murderous cravings she feels building within? So this sounds like a lot of trashy fun, as I say. So yeah, looking forward to that one. Okay, and then finally, the Auschwitz Detective by Jonathan Dunsky, who's an Israeli writer. And this is a part of a series of books. So there's a series of books he's written about this detective character called Adam Lapid. This is the prequel to that series, which has his kind of origin story, if you like, set in Auschwitz. So it's supposed to be really troubling and disturbing, as you can imagine, but I think a good kind of solid mystery novel as well. So again, looking forward to this one. So let's get on to the mini reviews of things I have read. So I've got 3 Kindle books to talk about, and then 4 physical books. So the 3 Kindle books, in no particular order, were Red Ribbon Butcher by Jennifer Taylor. So this is a kind of psychological suspense novel about a serial killer who's nicknamed the Red Ribbon Butcher, who is going round this kind of area in America, this kind of small area in America, murdering women and tying up their hair with a red ribbon. And it's about a young woman who lives in the kind of vicinity of the crimes, who gets a new next door neighbour move in next door to her, whose girlfriend was one of the victims of the Red Ribbon Butcher. And this central character comes to believe or suspect that her new neighbour is actually the serial killer. So really suspenseful. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's slightly somewhat requires a bit of suspension of disbelief at times, shall we say, in that there was not as much kind of intrusion of law enforcement onto the events of the stories as you might have expected, but still a really enjoyable suspense novel. The central character was really well done. Her kind of this weird relationship she has with her next door neighbour was really interesting, and there's some interesting other characters as well. So yeah, a really good suspense novel with a kind of double twist at the end that caught me by surprise, shall we say. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. After that, we have a book called Bucket List by Mark Towse and Chisto Healy. So again, this was sent to me by the authors, so sent to me by Mark Towse. So I read another of Mark Towse's books called Nana, I think it was called, a little while ago, which I also enjoyed. So his style is kind of almost slightly comic, and definitely kind of over the top and grotesque. And Nana, that was certainly the case. This book, slightly less, but there's still a lot of that in it. So it's about a bed and breakfast that's run by this weird old couple who are also cannibals. And various people come to stay at this bed and breakfast and meet grisly fates, as you can imagine. So it had some good suspense in it, had some good kind of gore in it. There's a definite as I say, grotesqueness to everything. It's almost kind of comic in its over the topness, but yeah, an enjoyable quick horror read. Not fantastic, not going to change the world, but a very enjoyable darkly comic read. And then the third Kindle book is one I struggled to classify, which was interesting, and I think people will find interesting. And that was A Puppet Scorned by Jamie Kort. So this is a short story about puppets, so about sock puppets, and it is an erotic horror novel. So it's an erotic horror story. So an erotic horror story about sock puppets, which is an interesting concept, isn't it? I'm not entirely sure it was successful, but it's definitely an interesting read, and it's a very quick read as well. So if the idea appeals to you, you should definitely check it out. And the characters, despite the fact they are literally socks, are actually quite well drawn. You do get to kind of understand a bit about them. So there's some very strange goings on, but it's kind of like a kind of melodramatic type relationship story with some kind of sex and murder in it, but about sock puppets. So yes, definitely an interesting book. Next up, this was a really good short story collection. So Call to the Void by Robert Royal Poff. So I can't remember how many stories there were in this one. It was a while ago that I read it. I think there's about 10 or so. But a really interesting collection of different stories. And all of them have this kind of otherworldly feel to them. Almost Lovecraftian at times. And you get the sense that there's something bigger going on. Something bigger and weirder going on behind the scenes. But yeah, a very nicely put together collection. None of the stories were kind of weaker than the others, if you see what I mean. So it felt quite even. Often with short story collections, there's a couple of stories you think, oh, did you really need to put that one in there? But with this one, they were all decent. So some interesting stuff in there. Some of them were quite extreme, so be warned. There's definitely some graphic content. But yeah, an interesting collection, and again, a book I very much enjoyed reading. Something completely different next. So this is a YA book. So not normally much of a YA reader, but Amy McCaw, the author of this, reached out to me and asked me if I want to read it. And I had heard great things about it from other booktubers. So it's Mina and the Undead, which is just a really fun kind of nostalgic horror novel. So set in the 90s, set in New Orleans, and great use made of that location as a setting for the book. So about this young girl from England whose older sister lives in New Orleans and works there, and the sister goes out to stay with her during the time of something that's called Fang Fest, which is like a kind of vampire celebration. So she goes out there to work in this haunted house. And there's like a fake haunted house, an amusement park style haunted house, and there's a unexplained death. And it all gets mixed up with, kind of vampires, with a kind of on-off romance. It's just a lot of fun and some lovely kind of 90s references. So yeah, if you like YA, if you like cosy horror, that's kind of just fun and feel like horror that feels a bit like a warm hug. That's how I would categorise this. I really, really enjoyed it. As I say, not the kind of thing I normally read. I normally read darker stuff, but this was quite a sweet book and a lot of fun. And a really good use of kind of backstory as well. So there's a whole backstory that gradually gets revealed as the book goes on. And Amy McCaw does a very good job of kind of knitting the two things together. Completely different from that then, but I had a great time with this. So this is Street Siren by Tom Batt. So as you can tell from the cover, this is a kind of retro crime thriller kind of thing. So much like Red Room and Butcher, it does you do need to suspend your disbelief a bit at times, and it is quite silly at times, but it was just written with such a love for grungy, horrible old stuff that I really enjoyed it. So it's set in the 80s in London. It's about a young woman who's a prostitute, and someone she knows gets murdered in a snuff film, and it's about her basically taking revenge on the people who made the snuff film. It's very stripped down. It's only like 120 pages or something like that. It's full of sex and violence. It was just a good time. It was just a good, nasty time. It's got a real nice kind of 80s vibe to it all that I thoroughly enjoyed. So again, definitely recommended if you like that kind of thing. And then finally, I showed in the books I still have to read, a book by Tamika Thompson. So this is the one by her that I have read, Salamander Justice. So this is from Madness Heart Press. So this was just a really nice short horror novel. So a really interesting examination of relationships and things like that, with a bit of it's almost like dark fantasy rather than horror, I guess I'd say. So about a young woman who is like a successful person in business, and about her relationship with her this guy she's known for a long time, but while she's coming to terms with the death of her ex-boyfriend. So there's like increasingly weird stuff happens as the book goes on, but a really well written and interesting written book about relationships that kind of weaves the horror into that. So it feels more like that's the starting point for the book, and the horror is used to tell that story rather than it's a horror story that's got relationship bits in it, if that makes sense. So yeah, and again, a very entertaining and interesting short read. Okay, time for a random book from the shelves. I thought I would pick another indie book, and this is indeed one I've shown in a previous Small Press Spotlight video, but still haven't managed to get to. It's Shark City Harbour by Daryl Pickett, which is a 70s set kind of crime novel set in Martha's Vineyard, and I think very much pays homage to Jaws. So yeah, really looking forward to this. It looks like a very entertaining read. I just haven't quite managed to squeeze it in yet. So I hope you found that interesting, and sorry today's video did go on a bit long, but I wanted to make sure I talked about all of the books that I had in my stack. So hopefully you've seen something that interests you here today, whether it's a book I have read and gave a mini review to, or one of the ones I've got in the pile to read and review. I think it's important that people like me talk about independent authors, because they just don't get the attention and visibility they deserve otherwise. So it's something I'm always keen to do, and I will try and get better at doing these videos more regularly. But yeah, let me know in the comments if any of these books take your fancy. I'll try and leave a list of all of them in the description. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.